Well, good morning, everyone. I'm speaking this morning on our search for meaning. Our search for meaning. I think it was Plato that defined man as a being in search of meaning. A being in search of meaning. And it's so interesting, really, how we humans are the only creatures in creation that want to understand where we came from and why we're here. Why are we here? What's the reason for our life, for this life that we are living? What is our purpose for living? For living today, for living tomorrow, for living our life. We thrive when we feel we have meaning and we feel we have purpose in life. And we tend to suffer when we don't feel like there's meaning to our existence or there's meaning to whatever we're experiencing. Frederick Nietzsche, who Viktor Frankl liked to quote, he was a philosopher, and he wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." I love that. We need a reason. We need a why to get up in the morning. We want to feel that our life matters. I have a friend who's an artist, and he recently posted one of his pieces of art on Facebook, and it was this self-portrait of him where he's looking distraught, and he's kind of holding his head, and he's made the image kind of blurred, and he's moving, and it was a very provocative image, and a lot of people I noticed commented, on his art, his post, and the meaning that I gleaned from it was that he had this feeling that life is precious and short and time is running out, that we only have infinite time. And am I living to the fullest? Am I living fully? Am I making this day and every day count? And it made me think of Thich Nhat Hanh. He always would say to make each moment, this moment, and this moment, and this next moment, make each moment an occasion to live deeply and happily and at peace. You probably love Mary Oliver, maybe as much as I do. There's a poem that she wrote that it really speaks to this. It's imploring us to live deeply. She wrote, "I know you never intended to be in this world, but you're in it all the same. So why not get started immediately? I mean, belonging to it. There's so much to admire, to weep over, and to write music or poems about. Bless the feet that take you to and fro. Bless the eyes and the listening ears. Bless the tongue, the marvel of taste. Bless touching. You could live 100 years. It's happened. Or not. I am speaking from the fortunate platform of many years, none of which I think I've ever wasted. Do you need a prod? Do you need a little darkness to get you going? Well, let me be as urgent as a knife, then, and remind you of Keats. So single of purpose and thinking, for a while he had a lifetime." So in that last bit of the poem, she's talking about John Keats, another famous poet. John Keats died of tuberculosis at 25. So his time ran out too soon. And so she, in this poem, she's urging us to live deeply and to find meaning in our own unique life that is unlike anyone else's, right? Viktor Frankl wrote, "The meaning of life is to give life meaning." No one can find meaning for us. Only we can find the meaning in our lives. Over many years of counseling, I have seen quite a few people who are on a very sincere spiritual journey, right? But they feel like something is missing, and they share their story with me. And more often than not, I find that they're suffering from a feeling of a lack of meaning and purpose. There isn't a fulfilling sense of meaning. And I so often find myself encouraging them to find a way to serve, to help others, even in the smallest way, because I know it would give them more of a sense of meaning. My spiritual teacher always places so much emphasis. She always places so much emphasis on finding a way to serve, selfless service. Um, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. It's said to be a very quick path to enlightenment, to serve others. And, Jesus had such a similar teaching when he said, I'm not a king, I'm not a prince, I'm a servant. That's the identity that I am. And he was offering the teaching that spiritual fulfillment comes in serving, in helping others in some way. And it's not just because it's morally good, it's because we are healed and we feel in our right place when we're doing something that causes a greater flow of love and generosity to move through us, to move through our being. I've been watching my little brother, my younger brother lately, growing so much. And I think in great part because he has shifted into a position recently of caretaking his partner who he lives with, because over the past years, she has become more disabled and unable to walk. And so she's become confined to a wheelchair. And it's his full-time work. He's her caretaker. And I'm seeing his compassion grow. I'm seeing his more selflessness blossom. And I'm seeing him willing to do whatever she needs to be comfortable. And it is changing him. It is changing him for the better. And it's really just really fills my heart up to see that. You might have read Viktor Frankl's powerful book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's not an easy read. It's very intense because of what he went through, but it's so incredibly powerful. Viktor Frankl was a prominent psychiatrist, a Jewish psychiatrist and neurologist in Vienna, until he was arrested by the Nazis, and then he spent 3 years in a concentration camp. And his book is so insightful to read. He wrote it in 9 days, right after he was liberated, released from the camp. He wrote this book. And in it, he offers powerful insights on how having meaning, how having a why will keep us going, will keep us persevering. He wrote about 3 possible sources of meaning. And the first one he talked about was finding meaning in work and doing something significant, being of service in some way. I think we have this feeling that, our work has to be overtly saving the world, but it really doesn't. I've had on my wall forever, and I have actually on my back wall here a quote from Mother Teresa that I love. It says, we cannot do great things in the world. We can only do small things with great love. Small things with great love. Like my little brother, he's not only caretaking his partner, but he's still, he'll find time to go most days over and visit my mom, and he'll do her dishes and he'll pick her up eggnog, and he just lets her know that she matters. And that describes Viktor Frankl's second source of meaning, which he says is finding meaning in love. I'd love to ask you what gives your life meaning. In fact, if you want to type that into the chat, I'd love to read it. I'd love those of you in person to think about it and talk to me. Let me know what gives your life meaning. I bet you'd share, love in some form. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, when we're at the end of life, what really mattered, all that really mattered, was how much love we were able to give and receive. It's kind of like that song I sang in the beginning, love is the reason we're here. We are here. And then, of course, finding meaning in love is broad. We can find it in loving and caring for someone in need. We can also find it in being cared for, when we're in need. I know a lot of people right now that are recovering from, surgery or, some kind of illness and, they're telling me about how amazing it is to realize how loved they are and to open their heart up and receive that. It's sometimes a lot to open up and receive that love, right? We can find love in nature. I feel it every day. I feel so in love with fall, walking through the park every day and the smell of the earth and the flowing water and the leaves falling, all of it. I just feel so much love for, and I feel loved by. So there are myriad infinite ways to express and experience love. And we can find new ways every day. To me, that's one of the wonders of living. And then the third source that Viktor describes is finding meaning in courage during difficult times. And he's the expert. He's the one that can really talk about that. But I actually think that finding meaning in the challenges we go through, I think that is so important to us as humans. We want to know that our suffering is not in vain. We want to find purpose in it and meaning in it. And I think there is mysterious purpose in it. I think we grow incredibly through our challenges. My neighbor that lives right next door, Joni, she's this sweet, very eccentric 80-year-old woman. And I just love her. But she fell and broke her arm a few weeks ago. And we visit a lot out on the porch here. And she was sharing with me that she has really found meaning in the experience. And she wanted to tell me all the meaning she'd found. And she didn't realize so many people cared about her. That was one of the big ahas. And, just she didn't realize how hard it was to receive. It was so much easier to give love than receive it. And I think that shows us, we like to be in control. But to receive love, when we need to receive love, when we need healing, that's a state of surrender. So I could tell when she shared with me, she was feeling a much greater state of surrender and trust in life. And she was actually feeling awe in that experience. So we all have things, that are happening, that are challenging, and we search for meaning in it. It's important to search for meaning in it. There's a beautiful quote from Khalil Gibran that says, "Your living is determined not so much by what." I'm sorry, let me start over. Your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you, as by the attitude you bring to life. Not so much by what happens to you, as by the way your mind looks at what happens. How does your mind look at what happens? That's where you find meaning. That's where you determine the meaning of what's happening. Today is November 6th, and in 2 days, November 8th, will be the 4-year anniversary of the campfire in Paradise. I lost my home in that fire. I know, Glenn, you lost your home in that fire. I know a number of you, I know Karen Martin had lost her home in another fire. A number of us have had this experience of loss, losing everything in a fire. And for each of us, our takeaway is different. Our takeaway is different. And the meaning changes over time. Our takeaway even evolves. We start to see it maybe differently after a year or a couple years. For me, I went through deep shock. I was in a state of deep shock and grief for some time. At the same time, I was ushering my whole congregation through the experience. A bunch of them had lost their homes. And I really felt it to be one of my most advanced Earth School lessons, definitely a, graduate degree curriculum. But the lesson I felt that I really got was just an overall becoming more free of material things. You know, it was such a deep initiation in realizing that things don't matter much. You know, they matter, but they don't matter that much, right? That what matters, what I really got is what matters a lot is love. It is love and the iterations of love, compassion and kindness, generosity and sharing and connecting from the heart with others. You know, those are my riches in life. You know, and I have a different view of stuff now. I actually marvel at how little attachment I have to stuff. It's really freeing, you know, because I really see now more than I saw before that our attachment to stuff brings fear. It brings with it fear of losing our stuff. And fear is exhausting. It keeps us from an inner freedom and an inner joy. So, you know, we can have similar experiences, but what it means for us, that is ours to find. That is ours to glean our own wisdom and meaning from, whatever we go through. Viktor Frankl wrote, "The meaning of life differs from person to person, from day to day, and from hour to hour. So what really matters more so than the meaning of life in general is the meaning of your life at any given moment." You know, when you read Frankl's Search for Meaning, his description of Nazi camps, he concluded in his experience that the difference between those who had lived and those who had died came down to one thing: meaning. Finding meaning, having a reason to keep living. He wrote, "Everything can be taken away from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, the choice to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." He felt that he survived the camps because he found meaning in the suffering he went through. And after he was released, he created something called logos therapy, from the Greek word logos, which means meaning. Logos means meaning. So it's meaning therapy, finding meaning therapy. And, you know, it's fascinating when you look up the word logos. It's also defined as the principle of divine reason. So, you know, he created this therapy to find the reason, to find the divine reason. Frankl tells a story in his book about how one day when he was in the camps, he felt his will was waning. You know, his will to live was waning, and his attitude and his outlook was becoming negative. And he said it's basically a death sentence in that situation. And so on that day, he had to march to a work site, and he had these terrible sores on his feet from wearing these old torn up shoes and no socks. And he said it was bitterly cold and windy. And as he was walking, he was just absorbed. His mind was absorbed in this endless stream of problems of his miserable life, these little problems like what would there be to eat tonight? And if there was a piece of sausage that came as an extra ration, should I exchange it for a piece of bread? And should I trade my last cigarette for a bowl of soup? And how can I get a piece of wire to tie my broken shoes back together? And then he had a moment of mindfulness, and he just became disgusted with this train of thoughts and the triviality of it all and his whole state of affairs, because he was a doctor, he was a psychiatrist, he was a great philosopher and a writer. And, you know, he was noticing his mind was just thinking in such a pathetic way. And so he forced his thoughts to turn to another subject. And he suddenly saw himself in this beautifully lit lecture hall, and it's warm and it's pleasant, and he's got this attentive audience sitting, a full audience sitting on these comfortable upholstered seats, and he's giving a lecture on the psychology of the concentration camp. So he's visualizing his future. And so in that moment, he somehow rose above this situation he was in and the suffering. And he observed the situation he was in as if it was already past. And so it was this faith. It was this faith in the future. It was this vision. It was this choice to change his mind that he attributes to his survival. And, you know, in his book, he has many moments like this, many moments where he turns his mind, he changes his mind. It reminds me of the scripture from Paul, from St. Paul, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, watch your mind, always be watching, observing. That's what mindfulness is. It's not to have a full mind, it's to be aware of the mind. You know, watch your mind and change the way you think when you are veering into dark places, right? Joe Dispenza, he talks a lot about this. He says, you know, to change is to think and act greater than our present circumstances. Think and act greater than your present circumstances. You know, and intuitively, Viktor Frankl knew this. He knew to interrupt the program of hopelessness and redirect himself to new thoughts, to a new attitude. It's funny, you know, in Unity, we belong to a greater movement, you know, that includes, you know, Centers for Spiritual Living. We're part of a new thought movement. Isn't that interesting? I love that. New thought. Have a new thought. Shift your mind, change your mind. That's something you have control over always, always, always. And you know, when you read Frankl's story, you realize how he used a practice in Unity we use all the time, denials and affirmations. He denied the power over and over and over of defeating thoughts. And he affirmed that he would survive, that he would give lectures, he would write books, he would share the wisdom that he was gleaning from the suffering he was going through. So, you know, you can really sense that his inner God, the inner God of his being, guided him. I, for one, am really grateful for him sharing the wisdom, you know, his experience, because, you know, for all of us that struggle at times, and we all do, we struggle to find hope sometimes and meaning. When we read his experience, and if, you know, we realize, hey, if he could do that in those incredibly difficult circumstances, then we can do that. You know, I can do that, right? Frankl said that life does not mean something vague, but something very real and concrete. And no man or woman and their destiny can be compared with any other man or woman and their destiny. No situation repeats itself, and each situation calls for a different response. Now, I find that really beautiful. You know, we're all like snowflakes. We're all unique. And part of what makes us unique is every experience we have, how we perceive it, how we move through it, you know, what we do with it, how it enlightens us and grows us, right? Everything that we experience and how we experience it, it's totally unique to us. You know, I have to say that, you know, this experience of being a minister and music director, this experience of being with you and sharing these teachings, exploring these wisdom teachings, this is my great joy. This gives me so much meaning and sense of purpose. It's very, very fulfilling to find ways to share love and to share love in this way and be of service. So thank you. Thank you for being here with me and allowing me to have this incredibly meaningful exchange. So in closing, I invite you to contemplate what has meaning in your life. What has meaning? What is the why? Why do I live this day? Why do I get up in the morning? You know, maybe it's being a parent, maybe it's being a grandparent, holding space, you know, of unconditional love for the children in your life or the loved ones in your life. You know, that's beautiful purpose. Maybe it's offering inspiration through being a prayer chaplain or through being a host, or through serving, being on this angel team. Maybe it's through music. Maybe it's through art. Maybe it's taking care of a loved one. Maybe it's just finding a way to express love every day in whatever way the day calls for, right? The Dalai Lama, he says, we're just visitors on this planet. We're here maybe 90 or 100 years at the most. We must try to do something good, something useful with our lives. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal, the true meaning of life. So may we fill our everyday and our remaining days with bringing happiness to others and to ourselves, including ourselves. Notice what fills up your heart and fill your life with more and more and more of that. Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you.